Broadcasting from the Business RadioX studios, it's time for Business Leaders Radio. Now, here's your host, John Ray.
And hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Business Leaders Radio. I'm John Ray, and folks, this is going to be a good one. Coach Jim Johnson is with us. Jim is a public speaker and author. Jim, welcome.
Thank you, John. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. So let's give folks a little background on you. You've earned that coach title the hard way, haven't you?
Yeah. So I actually grew up in a suburb of Rochester, New York, a town called Greece, and I was the oldest of 6 children. So I came, and we had a real big background in sports. My father was actually my high school basketball coach and kind of coached us in all kinds of youth sports, and we were really into sports. And so I grew up playing a lot of different sports. In high school, I really developed a real big passion and ended up playing for my father for 3 years as a high school player. Then I went to college thinking I was going to be a great college player and got humbled by getting cut from the team, although it did come back and help me, I think, because of getting different perspectives, because my dream was I really wanted to be a basketball coach at the high school level. And so I fortunately, because I screwed around a little bit in college for a while. I was kind of off the beaten path. And fortunately, I met a young lady that we are now going to be married for 40 years this summer. So she kind of helped straighten me out and got me back on the right direction. And I convinced her to move over to my hometown, and we got married the next year. And so I started my teaching and coaching career, and I kind of stumbled early on. I struggled to get a full-time job. Then I finally got my first full-time job and got a varsity basketball position at a town about 20 minutes from where I grew up. I thought I was going to turn this program around that wasn't very good. And of course, I did such a great job that I led them to 17 straight losses. And they ended up letting me go. So at 25 years old, I went from being really excited to not having a job again. And I guess a really huge break is I got an opportunity the next year to go work in a college level with a guy named Bill Van Gundy. And for people that listen, if you follow the basketball world, you probably are familiar with not Bill, but his 2 sons, Jeff and Stan, are both commentators and have been head coaches in the NBA. Mm-hmm. Coach Van Gundy helped me get really some guidance, and he became a mentor to me. But I really want to get back to the high school level, and I was fortunate to do that. And then actually my last 27 years, I ended up coaching at my town is pretty big. We had 3 high schools when I grew up, and now there's 4, but I actually went to one of them and was the head coach in my last 27 years at the other 2 high schools. And we ended up doing pretty well. And I know we're probably going to talk a little bit of how I got into public speaking. So I can delve into that a little bit after that. So,
yeah, well, let's talk about that. I mean, talk about your journey from coaching on the court to public speaking.
Yeah. So I started about the second half of my career. This is when I was at Athena. I was there for my last 20 years. I really started to study leadership, and I started listening to all the motivational Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and Brian Tracy and Tony Robbins and all down the line. And so I was trying to figure out how could I get into speaking. Well, I had something happen that I wasn't expecting, and that was in 2006, I had a young man that was in our basketball program that had tried out 3 consecutive years. His name was Jason McElwain. The world now knows him as J-Mac, a name I tagged because I kept butchering his last name, but he liked it. And so anyways, Jason is on the autism spectrum, and he has some learning disabilities. But he tried out for our team 3 consecutive years, not making it once, but he would come to all our off season, and he was my team manager personally for 2 years. And so his senior year, when he didn't make the team again, I said, I want to give you a gift for your commitment to our program. And the gift I offered him was I was going to have him go into uniform instead of his white shirt and black tie that he wore as our team manager at every game, and hopefully get you into our final home game, which we call senior night. Well, senior night came and everybody was fired up. They heard that Jason might get in, and I put him in with about 4 minutes to go. And John, when he walked on the court, I'm usually, although I do get emotional at times, but I usually don't cry at basketball games, especially ones I'm coaching.
Sure.
But this was different. When Jason walked on the floor, we had a good student body following, and they were at the game. And what I didn't know, and what Jason didn't know, is one of our parents made all these pictures, these placards, and put them on paint sticks and said to the students, if Jason gets in the game, show these. Well, I had no idea. When he walks on the court, they have all these pictures of him, and I get so overwhelmed with emotion. I sit down and tears start rolling down my face.
Wow.
Well, now the game begins. And just to give your audience, Jason was a little guy, too, at that time, although he has grown quite a bit physically since then. But he was 5'9", maybe 110 pounds soaking wet his senior year when he got in that game. So the first time he touches the ball, he shoots a three from the right corner. The crowd kind of stands in anticipation. It misses by like 6 feet. And I kid people that I know you're not supposed to pray in the public schools, but I was praying, dear God, please help him get one basket. And, his next possession, we actually get him the ball, and he misses about a 12-foot shot. And so I'm thinking to myself, all right, God's starting to listen. We're getting closer. And then the third possession, John, he makes a three. And the place just explodes. And running through my mind is, God must be a basketball fan. Not only has Jason scored, he's got a three-pointer. It can't get any better than this, right?
That's right.
Well, for the next 3 minutes, Jason's idol was the late, great Kobe Bryant. And he turns into Kobe for like 3 minutes. He just starts making shot after shot. And the place is in pure bedlam. And, of course, his coach is falling down in tears. In fact, with about a minute to go, I don't know how many baskets they had at that point, but his mother comes down out of the bleachers and taps me on the shoulder and whispers in my ear, Coach, this is the best gift you could ever give my son. Of course, I cried harder. I was so touched.
Yeah.
And then how the game ends actually is like out of Hollywood ending. He, at the end of the game, our opponent, I want to give kudos to their players and coach. They were Spencerport High School. They were really good sports that night. Jason gets the ball after they score a basket. He's dribbling down the floor, and he shoots like a 25-footer. And I'm like, Jason, don't shoot from there. You're going to ruin all this. And swish. And the place erupts. All our players run on the floor. The fans run on the floor. And all I can think is I'm living the movie Rudy. And they put him up on their shoulders, and he's got the game ball over his head. And then our public address now comes on. And I have no idea at this point how many points he has. He says the leading scorer for the Trojans, J-Mac, with 20 points. He was our leading scorer.
Wow.
And I could believe, because you figured it out, he basically scored 20 points in 4 minutes. So if you multiply that for a game, you scored 160 points for a game. So that wasn't too bad. And the two quick things. One was, well, I'll tell you one thing that was really powerful is that we had a lot of difficulty. In fact, I wrote a book about it. We had a lot of challenges that season. The book is called The Coach and a Miracle. And yet, when Jason got the game, I never asked the players on the floor to pass the ball. Yet in those last 4 minutes, he was the only one that shot the ball. They kept passing him, and it touched my heart deeply. And then interesting is Jason's major goal, besides that he wanted to play in a game, was he wanted to help us win our first Section 5 championship. I'd been a pretty successful coach at that time, but we had never won a Section 5 championship. And actually 3.5 weeks after the game, we won our first Section 5 championship. So in front of us, sold out of arena, about 11,000 people. So it was pretty crazy. And then the last thing, fast forward, as I mentioned, Jason's idol was Kobe Bryant. And actually 4 months later, he's in Los Angeles at the ESPY Awards. He's up for the greatest sports moment of the year. And one of the other 4 finalists is Kobe, his idol. Kobe had scored 81 points in an NBA game there, and he beat Kobe out for the ESPY. So that was pretty cool.
Wow. That makes chills run up my spine. Several aspects of that story. So, wow, what a great story. But so talk about what happened from there. I mean, how did that obviously changed your life? Yeah.
I mean, as I said, I was doing some speaking in the basketball world, but certainly nothing outside. But immediately after that season, because the story just blew up. I mean, we were getting calls at the school from all over the world. I mean, it was pretty crazy. But anyways, people started to reach out and said, "Can you come and share that story?" And so I started to do a few presentations. And at first, I was kind of shaky, and I'm like, But then I started to like it, and I was getting good reception, and I could share from my heart because it was a story that touched me deeply. And, I had such a bond with Jason. And so I developed a speech called Dreams Really Do Come True. And I started to travel. And then I got really a nice bit of advice. I was probably speaking for about 18 months, and I was still pretty clueless. I was starting to become, I think, a better speaker, but I knew nothing about the speaking business. I was doing it on the side. I was still teaching and coaching. And a guy saw me present in Chicago, and he came up to me after my speech. He said, "Coach, you're a really good speaker." I said, "Well, thank you." And I said, "You should really join the National Speakers Association." And John, at this point, I had no clue what he was talking about. I said, "What is that?" But it had to be a great bit of advice because I belonged to a couple of basketball organizations, one nationally and one in our state. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't involved in anything from speaking organization. I ended up joining, and I've been a member for 12 years, and that's helped me both from the speaking and the business side because I've learned a lot. I've gotten some mentors and learned from some of the best speakers in the world. So that was a really good bit of advice that I share. That if you want to be really good at something, you got to study it. And, get mentors and get people that can help you become better.
You talked about, Jim, how the speech that you were giving revolved around dreams come true. Mm-hmm. Dive a little more into that. And, really some of the principles that you passed along in your talks.
Yeah, so in that presentation, I do a leadership talk. We can talk a little bit about that as well. But
sure,
is that with the dream speech, what really struck me, John, was after about 6 weeks, and I'd given maybe one or two presentations after that season, and it struck me that what should I call this? And I said, pretty much everyone has some type of dream, whether they share it with people or not, and yet most people don't believe dreams come true. And, after I witnessed what Jason and all the studying I have done, of trying to study high achievers and learning from them, was I realized that, dreams can come true. And that's what I really wanted to share, is to inspire people. And I give them 6 keys to help them think about and implement in their life. And those keys are, number one is finding your passion in life. Like Jason was not really a very good basketball player, but he had a tremendous passion. He was a student of the game, and he tried to find different ways where he can contribute, even though he wasn't a player. I mean, he came every day to practice all our games, and the kid loved him. He was a big contributor, even though he was not officially a player on our team. So finding your passion, and I really advise people that passions can change, and I think you should try different things. Find things, some things you might like, some things, because there's not going to be any, I hear this and there's some truth to it, but, if you find what you love to do, you're never going to work your day in your life. Well, you know what I love coaching basketball. I love professional speaking, but there's things in both those businesses that I didn't like. So, I don't think it's, you're going to find where everything's perfect for you. But when you do have that passion, that it really helps you in the drive that you want to keep getting better. Second thing I talk about is discovering what your mission in life is, and really, I really try to help people develop their own personal mission statement and getting clarity. And I share it with them. My mission statement is to be an outstanding role model that makes a positive difference in the world by helping others make their dreams come true. Mm-hmm. And that's what I try to, I'm far from perfect, but I always go back to that. And I one bit of advice I give people in trying to get their mission, well, 2 things I'll say. One is, why were you put on this earth? Really focus on trying to answer that question. And 2, really to get clarity about what are your 3 most important values. And once you get clarity of that, like one of my important values is service to others. So, that's part of how I implemented what I just shared. The third thing I talk about is how to set goals. We used to spend a lot of time with our players, both on individual and team goals and getting clarity. The famous thing, I used to give my team a quote every day. And we broke our season into weeks. So each week we had a theme. And when we had our goals week, which was early in the season, we would talk about, a quote every day. And one of my favorites was, when you think it, ink it. And another one I always said is, you can't hit a target you don't have. So that's why I think the importance of setting goals. The fourth one that Jason was one of the best illustrations I can ever share with anybody is perseverance, the ability to that never give up mindset, to find different ways. as I said, Jason wasn't actually a player on our team, but he found different ways that he could contribute. The fifth one I talk about is carpe diem, the ability to seize the day. And I really talked, and I worked a lot with our players of having the proper mindset, being a growth mindset. In fact, I really push people to develop their own personal growth plan, to be intentional and to try to get a little bit better every day, because then you get that compounding effect. And then the last thing, which as I mentioned earlier, Jason's teammates passed him the ball every time he's out there. In fact, I still kid Jason to this day. I still see him a lot. And I say, Jason, I'm still looking for your first assist. You never passed the ball once. But,
he was too busy scoring.
Exactly. But, really the best thing was that he wanted so badly for us to win the Section 5 championship. And I think that still excites him more than than his game, And so being a great team player was a sixth key I share in that presentation.
Folks, we're here chatting with Coach Jim Johnson, and former high school basketball coach, now a speaker, author. Jim, you talked about developing your own, personal goals and aspirations, dreams. That really leads us into talking about mission statements, right? Mm-hmm. Let's talk about how you counsel folks out there to develop their own personal mission statement.
Yeah, so I think, one thing I mentioned earlier is that I think you really got to define who you are. I put out a newsletter every month, and one of the things I'm challenging my readers this month is to write out your three most important values, write out your three things that you believe about yourself, and write out three things that you believe about interacting with others. Like, I'll give you an illustration. Like, one of my core values is personal growth. And one of those is that I'm passionate about the things I do. And then as far as working with others, I always want to respect every person. So those are just some concepts. I think when you start to get clarity, and I really encourage people both in mission and also in goals, is write them down. Mm-hmm. Like, one of the things we really, with our players, when we talked about goal setting, was that we wanted them to actually write their goals on their cards. And, we started with a piece of paper. Then I would meet with them one-on-one. We talk about those goals, and I would encourage them to put them on cards and look at them and read them in front of a mirror. And we always talked about two statements to start your day. We said, tell yourself, I am responsible, because you're in charge of your life. And number two is, I like myself, because I think you got to care about yourself before you can care about others. Now, we also talked about that doesn't mean you're arrogant. We still want confidence with humility, not arrogance. Yeah. But those are the things that we really try to focus on them getting in both the physical and mental by writing it down. And then we also did mental imagery sessions where and I'll share a quick story about imagery. I retired from everything coaching wise in 2016. In my last year, I had a very good player that actually ended up playing part of 2 years ago. He played with the Houston Rockets. And in his senior year, we were playing in the semifinals of our tournament. And he gets fouled with 6 seconds to go in the game, down 3. He gets fouled on a 3-point attempt. And he goes up and he makes all 3 free throws, and we ended up winning the game in overtime. So we were able to go to the finals that year. Wow. And they asked him after the game, one of the reporters said, Anthony, what were you thinking? He says, we did so many imagery sessions. I saw myself making those shots so many times. I knew they were going in. And, and the power. And then just a little bit, what happened is when I retired, my assistant was going to take over for me. And he said, Jim, would you ask all the players, should we keep mental imagery? And 100% of them all believed, because that's how much, we got them to buy into that. And then certainly stories like I shared about Anthony shows the power of the mental piece of it.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things, though, is this interplay, I think, between your own personal mission and then the team, and right, and working within a team and having trust among your team. Yeah. Talk about some of those issues.
Sure. So I think, the first thing I encourage is being a leader is that you got to lead yourself. So it's having your own personal mission statement and having clarity about who you are is where I believe it starts. Number two is anytime you take over, business, a team, an organization, whatever you want to call it, is they have to have a mission. And if you're taking over, what you really got to do is you got to make sure that if there's already a team mission statement in place, that everyone knows it and everyone's buying into it. I know I've met with management teams and I'll say, so I see your mission statement is so-and-so. And a couple look at me like, oh, is that what it is? And that's not good.
No.
And so I think it's really good. Like, for example, our team mission was to develop winners on and off the court. And when I told them is my job was to give you clarity on what it takes to be a winner on the court, so being a great teammate, being someone that could handle adversity, thinking of the team first. And then what does it take to be a winner off the court? Being someone that's going to be as good as they can academically, someone that was going to take care of themselves and make wise choices, be a good community member. And one of the things I heard this a few years ago from Patrick Lencioni, and it is so true. I think the best leaders, he calls them CROs, Chief Reminding Officers. And I think as a leader, you got to consistently be sharing where the mission is. And so everybody's getting clarity and you're getting buy-in. And that's the other thing, I think, the power of the short one-on-one meetings. So everybody's clear, just asking the questions. Like I used to ask my kids all the time. I meet with them short time and say, all right, tell me how things are going. What are you working on and how can I best support you? Just making it simple, but, getting clarity so that you're building that bond, which leads into the other part you said was trust. And one of the things I challenge in my leadership talk, one of my keys is building trust. And, pretty much anyone, when I talk to any kind of organization, and I'll say, is trust important? 100%. You got to have trust, right? But what I challenge them is do you actually have a trust plan? Because we took over, as I mentioned, my first basketball varsity job was a disaster. I got fired after 1 year. But I took over 3 other programs, all been losing. We turned them around either in the first or second year and got a winning season pretty quickly. So, and what I did is I would meet with my staff after we got that together. And we talk about to my staff that what we got to do is we got to develop trust, that our players will trust us. And the 3 things we focused in on, one was that we were going to tell each other the truth. So the truth sets you free, as the Bible says. Number 2 is we have to align our words and actions consistently. So if we expect our players to be at practice at 6:30, we better be there early. And because all those things, I talk about building a trust account like a bank account. If you keep consistently put deposits in, you're going to build that account. If you consistently take withdrawals, you're going to withdraw that account. With one caveat, the one thing that's very difficult about trust is you can really destroy trust. And I'll give you an example. Like I said, my mission personally was to be an outstanding role model. Well, my last 23 years in coaching, I had a mentor challenge me. Jim, you say your mission wants to be a great role model. I challenge you not to drink alcohol during the season. Now, of course, you don't want your players to do that. Legally, they're not supposed to. But I can, right? I'm legal age. Mm-hmm. And I did. The last 23 years, I told my parents and my players that I would not drink during the season. And I never broke that promise. But what happens, let's throw the scenario. I share that, and 2 weeks later, I get pulled over for a DWI. Do you think that would shatter the trust? Yeah. I think so. I think you would absolutely. And it's probably something you would never get back with that team. It would take you a long time, which leads me to the last thing. Because we took over, 3 losing programs, is one of the things I really stress to our coaches is we got to catch these guys doing more right than wrong. Okay. Certainly as a coach and a leader, you got to critique and correct, but we got to really go. And I used to tell my staff, sometimes in practice, just go in today and be really positive, really try to focus on catching them right. So you're building that bond that you're recognizing, because, that old adage, what you recognize, you'll get more of. And I think that's something, what you praise. And the other thing we really worked on trying to teach our players and teach our staff is praise with specifics. Instead of saying, nice job, Johnny, because I coach boys basketball, I'd say, Johnny, that was a great effort diving on the floor for a loose ball. That's what champions do. So he had a lot of clarity. That was something that was great for us, for them to do.
That helps the visualization too, right? I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk a little bit about the kinds of groups that you speak to, the kinds of groups that ought to be interested in hiring you to come visit with them.
Yeah, so I speak to businesses. In fact, my most recent speech, I spoke to a mortgage company in Ohio. So I certainly love speaking to adults, but because I came from the education background, the two other groups that I love speaking to is I love speaking to schools, whether it be assemblies or teacher development days, speaking at conferences for education, whether it be administrators, so I've done all facets of the education. And the third one that I've started to do more of, because as I mentioned, I started a podcast and I'm working actually on a second book with a college professor, and she is also on the podcast with me, is to help young and emerging leaders. So one of the things that I've really started to do more in the last few years is speak to college students. I think I can make a great impact in sharing and just also people that are just getting into leadership positions. Because, you see so much, I see this a lot, the person that's the best salesperson in your organization, all of a sudden, okay, that person should be the sales manager. Well, the thing is, being a leader and being someone that's great in sales, there's different skill sets. And, so people get promoted and be a sales manager and they end up being a sales mangler because they don't know how to lead.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I really want to do is share ideas, because, all the mistakes I learned early, and I love to help people with that learning curve so they don't make the same mistakes, because leadership is a challenge, but you know what, we need leadership more than ever.
Yes, for sure, and the right kind of leadership, which you're talking about. Well, let's, as we kind of wrap up here, let's talk a little bit about your podcast and folks that are interested in that. Let's tell them where they can find it. Sure.
So it's on. We have a YouTube channel. We also are on pretty much all the platforms, and we can share my website down the road. But so it's called the Limitless Leadership Lounge, and what it is it's a tri-generational. So we have a young man that just graduated. He actually went to the high school I coached at, but I did not know him. I actually met him because I've become an avid tennis player. I met him at my high school courts, and he just finished his communications master's at Syracuse. So he's just getting started in the world, and he's kind of our host. And then myself and Dr. Renuma Kreen, she's an adjunct professor at a local college by me, and her and I are actually working on a book on it as well. And she's a pretty neat lady. She originally came from Bangladesh, came over to the United States. And so our format is we've done some, I think we've done over 40 now. And so we've done almost a year now. We're having a lot of fun with it. And we've had, we don't do some where we pick a topic and have a discussion, but more times than not, we've had some really neat people talk. And the focus is we really try to zero in our questions on helping young and emerging leaders. Boy, we've had some really good guests. I'm really proud of, it's funny. I know you're doing them now. It's something that I wasn't sure. I've become a podcast addict. I listen to them all the time myself. And I've thoroughly enjoyed doing it. It's one of my favorite things to do.
That's awesome. Coach Jim Johnson, folks, he's a leadership speaker, personal development. He's an author. Need to check him out. And we're going to tell you how to do that right now, because that's the most important question and answer. So let's give folks directions on where they can find you there, Coach.
Sure. So my website, so I wouldn't forget it, is CoachJimJohnson.com. So we hopefully, and at that, we have a free monthly newsletter. And then I do a weekly blog that they can sign up for. Those are all free. I also have a YouTube channel, Coach Jim Johnson, where I do weekly information, those types of things. And then, certainly we have all the information about my speaking, and sign up. And if anybody's interested, I'd be glad to give anybody a complimentary 15-minute coaching call. I do some coaching. I enjoy working with people to try to help them become a better leader of themselves and others. So if I can help any of your listeners that way, and if anybody certainly would love me to present to their organization. I do a leadership talk, as we mentioned, the inspirational talk, the dreams talk. I do some teamwork information. And also I started, I know inclusion has become very big, and, JMAC is certainly, we included them. So I just started a new presentation called Who's Your JMAC, which is inclusion. And we talk about 3 principles in helping you welcome people and include them in your team and organization. And then I do some workshops as well on leadership and goal setting.
Wow. Great work from Coach Jim Johnson. Jim, this has been great, and excited for you, those that work with you. Congratulations on the great work you do. And thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, John. Thanks for having me. And hopefully I'll get down your way and we'll get a chance to meet in person. So.
I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Hey, folks, just a quick thought here. If you've heard something here in this show that makes you think, hey, I want to share that, please share the show. That's what this is all about. And we're here to celebrate great business leaders like Coach Jim Johnson. So if you would help support us in that effort to celebrate him and his work and all the great business leaders that we've had on this show, we would appreciate it. So for my guest, Coach Jim Johnson, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on Business Leaders Radio.